In 2010, scientists at the Library of Congress looked under a microscope at Thomas Jefferson's original draft of the Declaration of Independence. What they discovered is different lettering underneath. The phrase our fellow subjects had been changed. Jefferson had scraped the word subjects off the page and written citizens on top of it. This powerful change is everything. Subjects are at the mercy of a king and are subservient to him. This is what the founding fathers were fleeing in England. But a citizen is a free individual with rights that come from only one king who is the creator of all the universe. On Saturday, we will be celebrating our 250th birthday of these United States of America. And our stories this week strike at the heart of what it means to be a citizen of this great nation. Because, contrary to what far too many people think, the dirt we walk on isn't magic dirt. One doesn't automatically feel a particular allegiance or affection for this place simply by arriving within our borders, what is left of them at least. America is not just an idea, it's not simply a grand experiment. America is a homeland. And if it is a homeland, if it is our home, it begs the question, who has rights to our home? In 1868, the 14th Amendment was added to the Constitution of the United States of America. It was a core part of Reconstruction after the Civil War. Its primary purpose was to secure citizenship, civil rights, and legal protections for former slaves. Many of them had even fought in the Civil War. They had fought for their nation. So while the 13th Amendment abolished slavery, it left big questions unanswered. Were freed people citizens? Obviously, slaves weren't citizens of other countries, even if they were natives of other nations. So even if they were freed, could states then deny them basic rights like voting? Even after Congress passed the Civil Rights Acts of 1866, it left many people worried that it could be repealed or struck down. So the 14th Amendment secured it in the Constitution and expanded protections. Now, it's important to understand that the 14th Amendment was explicitly addressing and solving the problem that was at hand. Slaves were now mercifully free, and they and their children were rightly given the same rights as anyone else in this country. Former slaves and their children had no other homeland to return to. They owed no allegiance to any other king or government. This was the intention of the amendment. And this intention is exactly what is at the heart of the Supreme Court ruling this week, where in a 5-4 decision, interpreted the 14th Amendment to say that anyone born on American soil, including those whose parents are here illegally, are automatically given American citizenship. The idea that anyone born on US soil is automatically a US citizen is a misreading of the 14th Amendment. The most crucial sentence in the amendment is, quote, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens. The phrase subject to the jurisdiction thereof is crucial, and it was added on purpose, but often ignored and has been ignored. What it means is that full political allegiance is owed to the US if you are going to be a citizen. You cannot have any allegiance to another country. Simply being physically present or obeying our laws doesn't make you a citizen, because that would mean that any tourist just passing through could claim citizenship. So, a child of a diplomat of another country, children of tourists, or children of illegal immigrants do not fall under that because they are not subject to the jurisdiction thereof. The framers of the Constitution and the authors of the amendment would never have thought in a million years that someone who is 9 months pregnant could walk into our country, have a baby, and then that baby is declared an American citizen, even though the mother is the citizen of another country. And then a chain reaction begins of so called rights to welfare social security benefits, and further citizenship for the rest of the family. Or that mother takes that newly minted American child back to her own home country to raise, and that child could technically become president one day, even though they never stepped foot back on American soil or were only here for a few years prior to running for president. This is what has led to what is called birth tourism. In 2020, CBS reported on a Turkish anchor, Baby Ring, operating in Long Island, New York. Reading now from the story, quote, prosecutors say that more than 100 pregnant women from Turkey came here to give birth, so their children were instantly granted U.S. citizenship. Investigators say the women then used benefits like Medicaid to cover their healthcare costs. The mothers who participated were not charged, but investigators say many of them returned right back to Turkey with their babies who will remain U.S. citizens. Here are a few more statistics. In 2023, 9% of all births in the US were to mothers who are here illegally. Approximately 260,000 babies, so more than a quarter of a million, receive automatic citizenship in the US every single year, despite their parents being in the country illegally. 75% of illegal alien households with children are using at least one major federal welfare program, with the child serving as the reason that they are then eligible. There are 1.5 million Chinese anchor children that are living in communist China who can vote in our elections and are eligible for our welfare systems, even though they've never lived in America. The reality is that the 14th Amendment clearly was not advancing birthright citizenship for children of illegal aliens or temporary visitors. In his dissent, Justice Clarence Thomas said that the 14th Amendment was enacted in the wake of the Civil War with one pervading purpose of securing equal citizenship for the freed slaves. He goes on to say that the majority opinion has now repurposed the 14th Amendment to protect its own set of preferred rights that the Reconstruction Congress never contemplated and that cannot find any support in the text that of the amendment today. In his dissent, Justice Samuel Alito said, "Suppose that a person's only connection to this country is that he was born here to a mother who was present just long enough to give birth and then quickly return to her native country. Suppose that country is a strategic adversary or enemy of the United States. Suppose the child never visited the US afterwards and was inculcated with hatred of this country. According to the court, now the Supreme Court, that person is a citizen of the United States and he cannot be deprived of his status as a citizen, at least under the current precedent." There are very important questions that cut right to the heart of this issue that we need to be asking. Number one, what does it mean to be a citizen? Number two, what does it mean to be an American? And number three, is American citizenship the birthright of the entire world? I fear that unless we can properly answer these questions, we won't be prepared for what lies ahead as our country becomes simply a blob of land with no defining principles, shared identity, or common goals. And we can't let that happen. Prior to the Scotus ruling on birthright citizenship, the story that was dominating my social media feeds was the news that the state of Texas was going to implement mandatory reading of the Bible in their public schools. Now, there is a lot of misinformation floating around, and it's important to not assume that everything you are hearing about this online is accurate. If you go over to the Texas Department of Education website, you can find an outline of exactly which passages and themes from the Bible will be taught according to each grade level. Now, From what I observed, there are people on both the right and the left that are very concerned about the implications of this new rule. There were the usual dramatics over the separation of church and state, the claims that our country isn't a Christian nation, so we can't teach the Bible. And there were also concerns about having secular teachers who hate Christianity being the ones to teach from the Bible. But I want to share a personal story about this topic. I attended a very secular high school in Southern California in the early 90s. I did not excel in the maths and sciences, but shocker, I did really well in all of the history and English classes. This landed me in an advanced English literature class my senior year, where we were assigned to read the Bible. Now, this class was taught by a very, interesting lady. She was a proud feminist who often regaled us with stories of her dating life, but passages of the Old and New Testament were required reading for her class and led to some really great conversations among students. Not a single parent complained. Nobody freaked out. And the students in that class were given valuable lessons in the history of civilization, understanding references that are seen in other pieces of literature, and cultural sayings and behaviors that can be directly linked to the Bible. The Bible was taught in schools for 300 years, going all the way back to colonial times in the 1640s. It was only in 1963 when the Supreme Court banned the use of the Bible and prayer in schools, citing the First Amendment. Important to note is what the court didn't say, which is that it's perfectly legal to teach the Bible as a matter of history, culture, and literature. But instead of attempting to thread that needle, the vast majority of states just simply dropped it altogether. While it may be factual that our country wasn't founded with an established national religion, or as a theocracy like the English government they were fleeing, it is absurd to claim that it was not founded on Christian principles and the system that explicitly comes from the Bible. The majority of our laws, especially the very first laws, which were rooted in the Ten Commandments, come from the Bible. Let me read to you a few quotes from the founding fathers of our nation, and let's see if we can discern how they felt about this topic. George Washington said, "You do well to wish to learn our arts and ways of life, and above all, the religion of Jesus Christ. These will make you a greater and happier people than you are. While we are zealously performing the duties of good citizens and soldiers, we certainly ought not to be inattentive to the higher duties of religion, to the distinguished character of patriot. It should be our highest glory to add the more distinguished character of Christian." John Adams said, "The general principles on which the fathers achieved independence were the general principles of Christianity. I will avow that I then believed and now believe that those general principles of Christianity are as eternal and immutable as the existence and attributes of God. Without religion, this world would be something not fit to be mentioned. And in polite company, I mean hell. I have examined all religion, and the result is that the Bible is the best book in the world." Dr. Benjamin Rush, who was a signer of the Declaration of Independence, and he's considered the father of public schools within the Constitution, said the greatest discoveries in science have been made by Christian philosophers, and there is the most knowledge in those countries where there is most Christianity. The only means of establishing and perpetuating our republic forms of government is the universal education of our youth in the principles of Christianity by means of the Bible. The great enemy of the salvation of man, in my opinion, never invented a more effective means of limiting Christianity from the world than by persuading mankind that it was improper to read the Bible at schools. Christianity is the only true and perfect religion, and in proportion as mankind adopt its principles and obey its precepts, they will be wise and happy. The Bible contains more knowledge necessary to man in his present state than any other book in the world. The Bible, when not read in schools, is seldom read in any subsequent period of life. The Bible should be read in our schools in preference to all other books because it contains the greatest portion of that kind of knowledge, which is calculated to produce private and public happiness. So recently, a Princeton professor wrote an op ed for the Washington Post in which he lamented the fact that his students are absolutely illiterate when it comes to biblical references and how they are foundational to understanding all of Western literature. Reading the Bible is how we understand the founding of our country, our Constitution, and yes, values. Including it in assigned reading in schools is actually the sensible and right thing to do. And before anyone shouts out, but what about separation of church and state? Please stop and remember that number one, the phrase separation of church and state appeared in a letter sent by Thomas Jefferson to the Danbury Baptist Association in 1802. It is not in our Constitution or Bill of Rights. What is included in those documents is that Congress will make no law establishing a national religion. Jefferson was reassuring the Baptists that the federal government would protect their freedoms. The separation was a mutual protection barrier to keep government from establishing or prohibiting the practice of religion. But it was not freedom framed as a way to keep religious influence from public life. Think of it as freedom of religion rather than freedom from religion. Number two, if you haven't already realized that there are no neutral institutions, then I have bad news for you. Anyone thinking that our public schools are bastions of neutrality has either not been paying attention or is willfully ignorant. As I've said before, everyone has a worldview, and government schools are no exception. Teaching the theory of Darwinian evolution as factual is advancing a religion of sorts. Now, it may be the atheistic worldview, but you can be religious about your claims against God and creation. It's past time for us to think of atheism and secularism as religions because you only have to look at the rainbow flags and BLM banners on the walls of classrooms to realize that neutrality is an illusion. Rather than a shocking new idea, Texas's decision to incorporate the Bible into their public school curriculum is simply a return to the educational common sense. For 3 centuries, this is how we created informed citizens who understood the moral and intellectual roots of their civilization. And the fact that we abandon that has churned out students who are culturally and historically illiterate. Our young people need to be equipped with the knowledge of Western literature, America's founding principles, and the ideas that shaped our republic. This isn't about compelled speech or violating the First Amendment. At a time when these same students are aggressively being taught secular, atheistic, Marxist, and communist ideologies, which masquerade as neutrality, restoring the Bible to schools in this capacity is the least radical thing we could do. As we celebrate our 250th birthday, the 2 stories that I highlighted today remind us that America's future hinges on determining who we are, what we value, and who and how many people we welcome into our shared home. True citizenship is about more than the soil beneath our feet at the moment of birth. It's about legacy, loyalty, and understanding what it means for this to be our homeland. Without that understanding, being an American becomes meaningless. And we can't preserve our country without preserving the ideas and the moral framework that it was built upon, and then passing that on to every generation that comes behind us. It's a death sentence if we attempt to cut them off from their roots. We're living with the results of that already. This is our home. It was purchased at great price by those who came before us. We have to be honest about what it means to belong here, what we stand for, and the principles we will refuse to surrender. My encouragement to you as you head into this 4th of July weekend is not to simply feel nostalgia and think about what was, but to have resolve and determination for what's ahead so that we can ensure that the next 250 years will be lived by people who will still know what it means to be an American, one nation under God. That's it for this week, friends. Before you go, be sure you have subscribed or followed to Not Gullible on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, and give it a 5-star review while you're at it. I hope you have an absolutely glorious Independence Day. Celebrate, make noise, eat great food, and remember to give thanks for being a citizen of the greatest country on the planet.